Well, the stream latency is going to be normal instead of, yeah. Anyway, hello. Welcome to the stream. Welcome, welcome Tommy. Welcome Dude Man. Welcome Random Guy. I'm pretty sure Tommy's We Are Venom. But yeah, welcome. I'm reading things from public domain so that I don't get in trouble. But then again, I'm playing video game music and I don't care. It's whatever. So yeah, if you guys have a recommendation for a spooky story, you can post it on the Discord, which I'm gonna put here real quick because I keep forgetting to put it in here. I keep forgetting to put it in. But yeah, you can post in the spooky story spot. I don't remember what spot that's in. Scary stories to read on stream. It's under the recommendations tab. So yeah, you know, I'm doing all right. Chilling. Have you guys seen this shirt that I got? This one? It's a Chainsaw Man. Is the music at a good level for you guys too? I just want to make sure that it's not like blaring loud for you guys and that it's at a good spot for you guys. But anyway, I'm gonna read some public domain horror, so it's not gonna be much. But what I have, it should run the whole night, at least. So, I'm just going off of physical books that I have. I didn't want to really read anything off of the internet. I mean, if I am going to read a story off that, I'm just going to pull up my tablet. Because I feel like... I feel like there's an actual, like, atmosphere to it when I'm actually, like, holding something and reading it to you instead of just me scrolling through it. So... Happy early Halloween, Circus Scrap. Welcome to the Stream of Wonders. So yeah, what I have though is H.P. Lovecraft, Tales of Horror, Kafka's The Metamorphosis and Other Stories, which it's not all, I mean, okay. The idea of the Metamorphosis is spooky, but it's not a spooky, I mean, like, it's body horror, but it's not like... It's really more depressing than scary. So, hopefully you play FNAF 3 on Halloween. I'm probably gonna play something else. I'm gonna play FNAF 3 at some point. It's gonna happen. I wanna spread it out a little. We got plenty of time. It's not like I'm gonna die tomorrow or something. Okay, I'm gonna knock on wood on that. But yeah, then I have Frankenstein. I mean, if I read Frankenstein, that's gonna be the whole stream. But this is like a nice little fancy, shiny edition. Ooh. And then I should probably take the stickers off of this one. Thank you, Half Price Books, for having very easily peelable stickers. And also, fuck you, Goodwill, for having shitty stickers that don't peel off. I mean, they peel off, but it's not as good of a peel. I'm gonna wait till I get paid before I get any new games. I got a bunch of games I still need to play. Like, I'm so behind on doing anything. So yeah, but this one here is Edgar Allan Poe, The Fall of the House of Usher, and other writings. So I figured I'd do a little of this, do a little of that, welcome something to the stream. So let's see. What do I want to read? You know what? Let's do Lovecraft. Don't look up what his cat's name is. I don't recommend that. I bought this at Barnes and Noble. There he is, the big racist himself. There's pictures in this too. So when the pictures show up, as long as there's not huge fucking knockers in it. Actually, that looks pretty sick. I don't... Hopefully I can show it. I want a tattoo like this. I figured you did. Let's see. Should we go with... I'm trying to think of what I should go with first. Because I could read Call of Cthulhu, but it's like 40 pages. These are really cool illustrations. Yeah, why not? Hey, Sane, happy birthday. Alright, you guys ready? For the Tales of Horror, the H.P. Lovecraft. And then, yeah, I'm going to read the Call of Cthulhu, and then I'll switch to Edgar Allan Poe, I think, next, or Kafka. I wanted to read it again, like the Metamorphosis, because I read it in high school, and I liked it a lot. So I'm hoping that I'll still like it, and I wanted to read his other stories, too. I just never got around to it. That's why I bought the book. And then I never got around to reading the book because that's my life. I might have read the Fall of House of Usher at some point. I know that I read the one about that guy that's in the tunnels. What is it? The Cask of Amontillado, Amarillo, Texas Steakhouse? I don't know what the fuck it's called. I can't remember. It's probably in this. I should read that because that's a really good one too. The Cask of Amontillado, whatever. I also read it in school. Amontillado. All right. Are you guys ready for a grand old adventure of me reading you stuff? I'm gonna hope that's a basic one. Who gives a fuck? These are all basic. So just Italy. Just because it's basic doesn't mean it's not still effective. It's still a good story. Alright. The Call of Cthulhu. Of such great powers of being, there may be conceivably a survival. A survival of a hugely remote period when consciousness was manifested, perhaps in the shapes and forms long since withdrawn before the tide of advancing humanity. Forms of which poetry and legend alone have caught a flying memory and called them gods, monsters, mythical beings of all sorts and kinds. Algernon Blackwood. Section 1. The Horror in Clay. The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate off to a great start, all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little. But someday the piecing together of dissociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age. Theosophists have guessed at the awesome grandeur of the cosmic cycle wherein our world and human race form transient incidents. They have hinted at strange survivals in terms which would freeze the blood if not masked by a bland optimism. But it is not from them that there came the single glimpse of forbidden aeons which chills me when I think of it and maddens me when I dream of it. That glimpse, like all dread glimpses of truth, flashed out from an accidental piecing together of separated things. In this case, an old newspaper item and the notes of a dead professor. I hope that no one else will accomplish this piecing out. Certainly, if I live, I shall never knowingly supply a link in so hideous a chain. I think that the professor, too, intended to keep silent regarding the part he knew, and that he would have destroyed his notes had not sudden death seized him. My knowledge of the thing began in the winter of 1926 to 1927, with the death of my granduncle George Gamble Angel, Professor Emeritus of Semitic Languages in Brown University, Providence, Rhode Island. Professor Angel was widely known as an authority on ancient inscriptions and had frequently been resorted to by the heads of prominent museums, so that his passing at the age of 92 may be recalled by many. Locally, interest was intensified by the obscurity of the cause of death. The professor had been stricken whilst returning from the Newport boat, falling suddenly, as witness said, after having been jostled by a nautical-looking I can't say this word. We'll just nautical-looking inward who had come from one of the queer dark courts of the precipitous hillside, which formed a shortcut from the waterfront to the deceased's home in William Street. Physicians were unable to find any visible disorder, but concluded after perplexed debate that some obscure lesion of the heart, induced by the brisk ascent of so steep a hill by so elderly a man, was responsible for the end. At the time, I saw no reason to dissent from this dictum, but laterally, I am inclined to wonder, and more than wonder, as my granduncle's heir and executor, for he died a childless widower. I was expected to go over his papers with some thoroughness. It is, yeah. I am reading you a bedtime story. Hi, Helen. I sent you a text as well. For that purpose, moved his entire set of files and boxes to my quarters in Boston. Much of the material which I correlated will be later published by the American Archaeological Society. Also, I'm reading this for the first time, so if I fuck up on this, I'm sorry. But there was one box which I found exceedingly puzzling, and which I felt much averse from shewing to other eyes. It had been locked, and I did not find the key till it occurred to me to examine the personal ring which the professor carried always in his pocket. Then, indeed, I succeeded in opening it, but when I did so, seemed only to be confronted by a greater and more closely locked barrier. For what could be the meaning of the queer clay bas-relief and the disjointed jottings, ramblings, and cuttings which I found? Had my uncle, in his latter years, become credulous of the most superficial impostures? I resolved to search out the eccentric sculptor responsible for this apparent disturbance of an old man's peace of mind. The bas relief was a rough rectangle less than an inch thick and about 5 by 6 inches in area. Obviously of modern origin, its designs, however, were far from modern in atmosphere and suggestion. For although the vagaries of Cubism and Futurism are many and wild, they do not often reproduce that cryptic regularity which lurks in prehistoric writing. And writing of some kind the bulk of these designs seems certainly to be, though my memory, despite much familiarity with the papers and collections of my uncle, failed in any way to identify this particular species, or even to hint at its remotest affiliations. Above these apparent hieroglyphics was a figure of evidently pictorial intent. Though its impressionistic execution forbade a very clear idea of its nature, it seemed to be a sort of monster or symbol representing a monster, of a form which only a diseased fancy could conceive. If I say that my somewhat extravagant imagination yielded simultaneous pictures of an octopus, a dragon, and a human caricature, I shall not be unfaithful to the spirit of the thing. A pulpy, tentacle head surmounted a grotesque and scaly body with rudimentary wings, but it was the general outline of the whole which made it most shockingly frightful. Behind the figure was a vague suggestion of a cyclopean architectural background. I do have that book. Helen, I do have it. There's a picture. Hopefully I can actually show you it. There it is. The picture. Wow. That's pretty cool looking. The writing accompanying this oddity was, aside from a stack of press cuttings in Professor Angel's most recent hand, and made no pretense to literary style, which seemed to be the main document, was headed Cthulhu Cult, and characters painstakingly printed to avoid the erroneous reading of a word so unheard of. The manuscript was divided into two sections, the first of which was headed 1925, Dream and Dream Work of H.A. Wilcox, 7 Thomas Street, Providence, Rhode Island, and the second, Narrative of Inspector John R. LaGrasse, 121 Bienville Street, New Orleans, Louisiana, at 1908 AAS MTG, notes on same and Professor Webb's account. The other manuscript papers were all brief notes, some of them accounts of the queer dreams of different persons, some of them citations from theosophical books and magazines, notably W. Scott Eliot's Atlantis and the Lost Lemuria. And the rest comments on long surviving secret societies and hidden cults, which references to passages in such mythological and anthropological source books as Fraser's Gold Bough and Miss Murray's Witch Cult in Western Europe. I feel like I'm reading a citation. The cuttings largely alluded to mental illnesses and outbreaks of group folly or mania in the spring of 1925. Hey, low rank god, you pissed yourself? That well. No, there's definitely other books out there that you like. I believe that there's at least 10 books, maybe more, that you will like. The first half of the principal manuscript told a very peculiar tale. It appears that on March 1st, 1925, a thin, dark young man of neurotic and excited aspect had called upon Professor Angel bearing the singular clay bas-relief, which was then exceedingly damp and fresh. His card bore the name of Henry Anthony Wilcox, and my uncle had recognized him as the youngest son of an excellent family, slightly known to him, who had latterly been studying sculpture at the Rhode Island School of Design, and living alone at the Fleur de Lis building near that institution. Wilcox was a precocious youth of known genius, but great eccentricity and had from childhood excited attention through the strange stories and odd dreams he was in the habit of relating. He called himself psychically, or yeah, psychically hypersensitive, but the staid folk of the ancient commercial city dismissed him as merely queer. Never mingling much with his kind, he had dropped gradually from social visibility, and was now known only to a small group of aesthetes from other towns. Even the Providence Art Club, anxious to preserve its conservatism, had found him quite hopeless, just like me. On the occasion of the visit ran the professor's manuscript. The sculptor abruptly asked for the benefit of his host's archaeological knowledge in identifying the hieroglyphics on the bas relief. He spoke in a dreamy, stilted manner which suggested pose and alienated sympathy. And my uncle shewed some sharpness in replying, for the conspicuous freshness of the tablet implied kinship with anything but archaeology. Young Wilcox's rejoinder, which impressed my uncle enough to make him recall and record it verbatim, was of a fantastically poetic cast, which must have typified his whole conversation, and which I have since found highly characteristic of him. He said, "It is new, indeed, for I had made it last night in a dream of strange cities, and dreams are older than brooding Tyre, or the contemplative Sphinx, or garden-girdled Babylon." I'm glad you fixed your name too, Weird Venom. I don't know why they changed it to your guys' I don't get it. Whatever. It was then that he began that rambling tale which suddenly played upon a sleeping memory and won the fevered interest of my uncle. There has been a slight earthquake tremor the night before, the most considerable felt in New England for some years, and Wilcox's imagination had been keenly affected. Upon retiring, he had an unprecedented dream of great cyclopean cities of Titan blocks and sky-flung monoliths, all dripping with green ooze and sinister with Latin horror. Hieroglyphics had covered the walls and pillars, and from some undetermined point below had come a voice that was not a voice, a chaotic sensation which only fancy could transmute into sound, but which he attempted to render by the almost unpronounceable jumble of letters. Cthulhu, I don't know what that says. I'm trying my best. This verbal jumble was the key to the recollection which excited and disturbed Professor Angel. He questioned the sculptor with scientific minuteness and studied with almost frantic intensity the bas relief on which the youth had found himself working, chilled and clad only in his night clothes, when waking had stolen bewilderingly over him. My uncle blamed his old age, Wilcox afterwards said, for his slowness in recognizing both hieroglyphics and pictorial design. Many of his questions seemed highly out of place to his visitor, especially those which tried to connect the latter with strange cults or societies. And Wilcox could not understand the repeated promises of silence which he was offered in exchange for an admission of membership in some widespread mystical and paganally religious body. When Professor Angel became convinced that the sculptor was indeed ignorant of any cult or system of cryptic lore, he besieged his visitor with demands for future reports of dreams. This bore regular fruit, for after the first interview, the manuscript records daily calls of the young man, during which he related startling fragments of nocturnal imagery, whose burden was always some terrible cyclopean vista of dark and dripping stone, with a subterranean voice or intelligence shouting monotonously, and enigmatical sense impacts uninscribable save as gibberish. The two sounds most frequent repeated are those rendered by the letters Cthulhu and Lech. It's like really? I don't know. I won't be here long. I'm gonna... Okay, yeah, no, it's fine. I get it. This probably is not going to be everybody's cup of tea tonight, but I'm hoping that somebody will enjoy it. I think most of everybody left. So, if anything, I am just reading to myself out loud. On March 23rd, the manuscript continued. Wilcox failed to appear, and inquiries at his quarters revealed that he had been stricken with an obscure sort of fever and taken to the home of his family in Waterman Street. He had cried out in the night, arousing several other artists in the building, and had manifested since then only alternations of unconsciousness and delirium. My uncle at once telephoned the family, and from that time forward kept close watch of the case, calling often at the Thayer Street office of Dr. Toby, whom he learned to be in charge. The youth's febrile mind apparently was dwelling on strange things, and the doctor shuddered now and then as he spoke of them. They included not only a repetition of what he had formerly dreamed, but touched wildly on a gigantic thing, miles high, which walked or lumbered about. He at no time fully described this object, but occasional frantic words, as repeated by Dr. Toby, convinced the professor that it must be identical with the... Good. If anything, I could read calming stories next time to really put everyone to sleep. Nameless monstrosity he had sought to depict in his dream sculpture. Reference to this object, the doctor added, was invariably a prelude to the young man's subsidence into lethargy. His temperature, oddly enough, was not greatly above normal, but his whole condition was otherwise such as to suggest true fever rather than mental disorder. On April 2nd, at about 3 p.m., every trace of Wilcox's malady, suddenly ceased. He sat upright in bed, astonished to find himself at home and completely ignorant of what had happened in dream or reality since the night of March 22nd. Pronounced well by his physician, he returned to his quarters in 3 days, but to Professor Engel, he was of no further assistance. All traces of strange dreaming had vanished with his recovery, and my uncle kept no record of his night thoughts after a week of pointless and irrelevant accounts of thoroughly usual visions. Gerbatologist. Holy shit, Gerb, it's been a long time. How are you? Thank you for thinking that this is great. I'm trying my best. Here the first part of the manuscript ended, but references to certain of the scattered notes gave me much material for thought. So much, in fact, that only the ingrained skepticism then forming my philosophy can account for my continued distrust of the artist. The notes in question were those descriptive of the dreams of various persons covering the same period as that in which young Wilcox had had his strange visitations. My uncle, it seems, had quickly instituted a prodigiously far-flung body of inquiries amongst nearly all the friends whom he could question without impertinence, asking for nightly reports of their dreams and the dates of any notable visions for some time past. The reception of his request seems to have been varied by he must, at the very least, have received more responses than any ordinary man could have handled without a secretary. This original correspondence was not preserved, but his notes formed a thorough and really significant digest. Average people in society and business, New England's traditional salt of the earth, gave an almost completely negative result, though scattered cases of uneasy but formless nocturnal impressions appear here and there, always between March 23rd and April 2nd, the period of young Wilcox's delirium. Scientific men were little more affected, though 4 cases of vague description suggest fugitive glimpses of strange landscapes. In one case, there is mentioned a dread of something abnormal. It was from the artists and poets that the pertinent answers came, and I know that panic would have broken loose had they been able to compare notes. As it was, lacking their original letters, I have suspected the compiler of having asked leading questions, or of having edited the correspondence in corroboration of what he had latently resolved to see. That is why I continue to feel that Wilcox, somehow cognizant of the old data which my uncle had possessed, had been imposing on the veteran scientist. These responses from aesthetics told a disturbing tale. From February 28th to April 2nd, a large proportion of them had dreamed very bizarre things, the intensity of the dreams being immeasurably the stronger during the period of the sculptor's delirium. Over a fourth of those who reported anything reported scenes and half sounds not unlike those which Wilcox had described, and some of the dreamers confessed acute fear of the gigantic nameless thing visible toward the last. One case, which the note describes with emphasis, was very sad. The subject, a widely known architect with leanings toward theosophy and occultism, went violently insane on the date of young Wilcox's seizure and expired several months later after incessant screamings to be saved from some escaped denizen of hell. Had my uncle referred to these cases by name instead of merely by number, I should have attempted some corroboration and personal investigation, but as it was, I succeeded in tracing down only a few. All of these, however, bore out the notes in full. I have often wondered if all the objects of the professor's questioning felt as puzzled as did this fraction. It is well that no explanation shall ever reach them. The press cuttings, as I have intimated, touched on cases of panic, mania, and eccentricity. Oh my God. During the given period, Professor Angel must have employed a cutting bureau, for the number of extracts was tremendous and the sources scattered throughout the globe. Here was a nocturnal suicide in London, where a lone sleeper had leaped from a window. After a shocking cry, here likewise a rambling letter to the editor of a paper in South America, where a fanatic deduces a dire future from visions he had seen. A dispatch from California describes a Theophis colony as donning white robes en masse for some glorious fulfillment, which never arrives, whilst items from India speak guardedly of serious native unrest toward the end of March. Voodoo orgies multiply in Haiti, and African outposts report ominous mutterings. American officers in the Philippines find certain tribes bothersome about this time, and New York policemen are mobbed by hysterical Levantines on the night of March 22nd to 23rd. The west of Ireland, too, is full of wild rumor and legendary, and a fantastic painter named Ardos Bonnet hangs a blasphemous dream landscape in the Paris Spring Salon of 1926. And so numerous are the recorded troubles in insane asylums that only a miracle can have stopped the medical fraternity from noting strange parallelisms and drawing mystified conclusions. A weird bunch of cuttings, all told, and I can at this date scarcely envisage the callous rationalism with which I set them aside. But when I was convinced that young Wilcox had known of the older matters mentioned by the professor. Don't look up HP. Thanks, Weird Venom. Hey, Wonder Red. How you doing? I'm gonna drink some water real quick. Woo! Alright. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing anything. Some of these words I've never seen before, so I'm doing my best. We are... Let's see, we're on page 10, and this story is approximately 48 pages, so there are some really big pictures, and when the pictures show up, I will show them. I'm not a monster, unlike Cthulhu, who is a monster. I've been doing alright, Gerbatologist. I've just been sitting here streaming and stuff. I still talk to Maple. I actually just talked to her today. She's doing okay. She's got a girlfriend now, and she's still looking for a job. If you know any jobs in the Atlanta area, by all means, let her know. But Yeah. Could be fake, could be real, who knows? I don't want to actually read, like, true... if it's, like, true crime stories, like, no thank you. But if it's, like, ooh, that was eerie, happened in real life thing, but... Alright. The older matters which had made the sculptor's dream and bas relief so significant to my uncle formed the subject of the second half of his long manuscript. Once before, it appears, Professor Angel had seen the hellish outlines of the nameless monstrosity, puzzled over the unknown hieroglyphics, and heard the ominous syllables which can only be rendered only as Cthulhu. And all this in so stirring and horrible connection that it is small wonder he pursued young Wilcox with queries and demands for data. The earlier experience had come in 1908, 17 years before, when the American Archaeological Society held its annual meeting in St. Louis. St. Louis mention? Oh my god. Professor Angel has befitted one of his authority and attainments, had a prominent part in all the deliberations, and was one of the first to be approached by the several outsiders who took advantage of the convocation to offer questions for correct answering and problems for expert solution. The chief of these outsiders, and in a short time the focus of interest for the entire meeting, was a commonplace-looking, middle-aged man who had traveled all the way from New Orleans for certain special information unobtainable from any local source. His name was John Raymond LaGrasse. This guy. That guy. This one. That's what he looks like. And he was by profession an inspector of police. With him, he bore the subject of his visit a grotesque, repulsive, and apparently very ancient stone statue, or statuette whose origin he was at a loss to determine. It must not be fancied that Inspector LaGrasse had the least interest in archaeology. On the contrary, his wish for enlightenment was prompted by purely professional considerations. The statuette, idol, fetish, or whatever it was, had been captured some months before in the wooded swamps south of New Orleans during a raid on a supposed voodoo meeting, and so singular and hideous were the rites connected with it that the police could not but realize that they had stumbled on a dark cult totally unknown to them, and infinitely more diabolical than even the blackest of the African voodoo circles. Of its origin, apart from the erratic and unbelievable tales extorted from the captured members, absolutely nothing was to be discovered. Hence the anxiety of the police for any antiquarian lore which might help them to place the frightful symbol and through it track down the cult to its fountainhead. Inspector LaGrasse was scarcely prepared for the sensation which his offering created. One sight of the thing had been enough to throw the assembled men of science into a state of tense excitement, and they lost no time in crowding around him to gaze at the diminutive figure whose utter strangeness and air of genuinely abysmal antiquity hinted so potently at unopened and archaic vistas. No recognized school of sculpture had animated this terrible object, yet centuries and even thousands of years seemed recorded in its dim and greenish surface of unplaceable stone. The figure, which was finally passed slowly from man to man for close and careful study, was between 7 and 8 inches in height, and of exquisitely artistic workmanship. It represented a monster of vaguely anthropoid outline, but with an octopus-like head whose face was a mass of feelers, a scaly, rubbery-looking body, prodigious claws on hind and fore feet, and long, narrow wings behind. This thing, which seemed instinct with a fearsome and unnatural malignancy, was of a somewhat bloated corpulence and squatted evilly on a rectangular block of pedestal covered with undecipherable characters. The tips of the wings touched the back edge of the block. The seat occupied the center, whilst the long curved claws of the doubled up, crouching hind legs gripped the front edge and extended a quarter of the way down toward the bottom of the pedestal. The salafed head was bent forward so that the ends of the facial feelers brushed the backs of huge forepaws, which clasped the croucher's elevated knees. The aspect of the whole was abnormally lifelike, and the more subtly fearful because its source was so totally unknown. Its vast, awesome, and incalculable age was unmistakable, yet not one link did it shew with any known type of art belonging to civilization's youth, or indeed to any other time. Totally separate and apart, its very material was a mystery, for the soapy greenish black stone with its golden or iridescent flecks and striations resembled nothing familiar to geology or mineralogy. The characters along the base were equally baffling, and no member. This is the horror that we cannot comprehend. The Cthulhu. There he is. Anyway. Present despite a representation of half the world's expert learning in this field could form the least notion of even the remotest linguistic kinship. They, like the subject and material, belong to something horribly remote and distinct from mankind as we know it. Something frightfully suggestive of old and unhallowed cycles of life in which our world and our conceptions have no part. And yet, as the members severally or severely, yeah, it's severely. I don't know. I'm losing. No, wait, no, that's severally. You know, because that, whatever. Shook their heads and confessed defeat at the inspector's problem. There was one man in the gathering who suspected a touch of bizarre familiarity in the monstrous shape and writing, and who presently told with some diffidence of the odd trifle he knew. This person was the late William Channing Webb, professor of anthropology at Princeton University, an explorer of no slight note. Professor Webb had been engaged 48 years before in a tour of Greenland and Iceland in search of some runic inscriptions, which he failed to unearth, and whilst high up on the West Greenland coast had encountered a singular tribe of cult of degenerate Esquimaux, whose religion, a curious form of devil worship, chilled him with its deliberate bloodthirstiness and repulsiveness. It was a faith of which other Esquimaux, I don't know, knew little, and which they mentioned only with shudders, saying that it had come down from horribly ancient aeons before ever the world was made. Besides nameless rites and human sacrifices, there were certain queer hereditary rituals addressed to a supreme elder devil or Tornosuk. That's what it is, Tornosuk. And of this Professor Webb had taken a careful phonetic copy from an aged Angakok, or wizard priest, expressing the sounds in Roman letters as best as he knew how. But just now, of prying significance, was the fetish which this cult had cherished, and around which they danced when the aurora leaped high over the ice cliffs. It was, the professor stated, a very crude bas-relief of stone, comprising a hideous picture and some cryptic writing, and so far as he could tell, it was a rough parallel in all essential features of the bestial thing now lying before the meeting. This data, received with suspense and astonishment by the assembled members, proved doubly exciting to Inspector Legras, and he began at once to ply this information with questions. Having noted and copied an oral ritual among the swamp cult worshippers his men had arrested, he besought the professor to remember as best as he might the syllables taken down amongst the diabolus Esquimaux. There then followed an exhaustive comparison of details and a moment of really awed silence when both detective and scientist agreed on the virtual identity of the phrase common to two hellish rituals so many worlds of distance apart. What, in substance, both the Esquimaux wizards and the Louisiana swamp priests had chanted to their kindred idols was something very like this. The word divisions being guessed at from traditional breaks in the phrase as chanted aloud, Fingului, Nuf, Cthulhu, Rayleigh, Lagras had 1 point in advance of Professor. That's what it looks like to me. Of Professor Webb for several among his mongrel prisoners had repeated to him that what older celebrants had told them the words meant. This text, as given, ran something like this: "In this house of Raylith dead Cthulhu waits dreaming." And now, in response to a general and urgent demand, Inspector Lagras related as fully as possible his experience with the swamp worshippers, telling a story to which I could see my uncle attach profound significance. It savored of the wildest dreams of Mythmaker and Theosophist, and disclosed an astonishing degree of cosmic imagination among such half-castes and pariahs as might be least expected to possess it. On November 1st, 1907, there had come to the New Orleans police a frantic summons from the swamp and lagoon country to the south. The squatters there, mostly primitive but good-natured descendants of Lafitte's men, were in the grip of stark terror from an unknown thing which had stolen upon them in the night. It was voodoo, apparently, but voodoo of a more terrible sort than they had ever known, and some of their women and children had disappeared since the malevolent tom-tom had begun its incessant beating far within the black-haunted woods where no dweller ventured. There were insane shouts and horrific screams, soul-chilling chants, and dancing devil flames, and the frightened messenger added the people could stand it no more. So a body of 20 police, filling 2 carriages and an automobile, had set out in the late afternoon with the shivering squatter as a guide. At the end of the passable road they alighted, and for miles splashed on in silence through the terrible cypress woods where day never came. Ugly roots and malignant hanging nooses of Spanish moss beset them, and now and then a pile of dank stones or fragment of a rotting wall intensified by its hint of morbid habitation, a depression which every malformed tree and every fungus islet combined to create. At length the squatter settlement, a miserable huddle of huts, hove in sight, and hysterical dwellers ran out to cluster around the group of bobbing lanterns. The muffled beat of tom-toms was now faintly audible far, far ahead, and a curdling shriek came at infrequent intervals when the wind shifted. A reddish glare, too, seemed to filter through the pale undergrowth beyond endless avenues of forest night. Reluctant even to be left alone again, each of the one of the cowed squatters refused point blank to advance another inch toward the scene of unholy worship. So Inspector Lagras and his 19 colleagues plunged on unguided into black arcades of horror that none of them had ever trod before. The region now entered by the police was one of traditionally evil repute, substantially unknown and untraversed by white men. There were legends of a hidden lake unglimpsed by mortal sight, in which dwelt a huge formless white polypus thing with luminous eyes, and squatters whispered that bat-winged devils flew up out of caverns and entered earth to worship at midnight. They said it had been there before Iberville, before LaSalle, before the Indians, and before even the wholesome beasts and birds of the woods. It was nightmare itself, and to see it was to die. But it made men dream, and so they knew enough to keep away. The present voodoo orgy was indeed on the merest fringe of this abhorred area, but that location was bad enough. Hence, perhaps, the very place of the worship had terrified the squatters more than the shocking sounds and incidents. Have I played any of the Arkham games? I played a little bit of the Sinking City, and I played a little bit of the Call of Cthulhu game, and then I had the Arkham Horror board game, but I sold it to someone because I could not figure out how to do it. But yeah, that's what I've played so far, though. Only poetry or madness could do justice to the noises heard by Legras's men as they plowed on through the black morass toward the red glare and the muffled tom-toms. There are vocal qualities peculiar to men and vocal qualities peculiar to beasts, and it is terrible to hear the one when the source should yield the other. Animal fury and orgiastic license were here whipped themselves to demonic heights by howls and squawking ecstasies that tore and reverberated through those nighted woods like pestilential tempests from the gulfs of hell. Now and then the less organized ululation would cease, and from what seemed a well-drilled chorus of hoarse voices would rise and sing-song chant that hideous phrase or ritual. Fingoli, Magathaginough, Cthulhu, Rylith, Wagadnagle, Fegatan. Then the men, have reached a spot where the trees were thinner, came suddenly in sight of the spectacle itself. 4 of them reeled, 1 fainted, and 2 were shaken into a frantic cry, which the mad here's a picture of where they're at. They're in the haunted woods. Woo. I think I got Call of Cthulhu for free on something. You might own it and not even realize it. I can't show this picture. They're naked. I'm just kidding. I can't, because you can't actually see it. You can't see anything bad. There's the ritual happening. Ooh. Cacophony of the orgy fortunately deadened. Legras dashed swamp water on the face of the fainting man, and all stood trembling, nearly hypnotized with horror. In a natural glade of the swamp stood a grassy island of perhaps an acre's extent, clear of trees and tolerably dry. On this now leaped and twisted a more indescribable horde of human abnormality than any but a Sime or an Angarola could paint. Void of clothing, this hybrid spawn were braying, bellowing, and writhing about a monstrous, ring-shaped bonfire, in the center of which, revealed by occasional rifts in the curtain of flame, stood a great granite monolith, some 8 feet in height, on top of which incongruous with its diminutiveness, rested the noxious cavern statuette. From a wide circle of 10 scaffolds set up at regular intervals, with the flame-gripped monolith as a center-hung head downward, the oddly marred bodies of the helpless squatters who had disappeared. It was inside this circle that the ring of worshippers jumped and roared, the general direction of the mass motion being from left to right, an endless bacchanal between the ring of bodies and the ring of fire. Oh, I think it's if anything, it's like 15 to 20 bucks. It may have been only imagination, and it may have only been echoes which induced one of the men, an excitable Spaniard, to fancy he heard antiphonal responses to the ritual from some far unilluminated spot deeper within the wood of ancient legendary and horror. This man, Joseph D. Galvez, I later met and questioned, and he proved distractingly imaginative. He indeed went so far as to hint of the faint beating of great wings and a glimpse of shining eyes and a mountainous white bulk beyond the remotest trees, but I suppose he had been hearing too much naive superstition. Actually, the horrified pause of the men was of comparatively brief duration. Duty came first, and although there must have been nearly 100 mongrel celebrants in the throng, the police relied on their firearms and plunged determinately into the nauseous rout. For 5 minutes, the resultant din and chaos were beyond description. Wild blows were struck, shots were fired, and escapes were made, but in the Ligue, Legras was able to count some 47 sullen prisoners, whom he forced to dress in haste and fall into line between 2 rows of policemen. 5 of the worshippers lay dead, and 2 severely wounded ones were carried away on improvised stretchers by their fellow prisoners. The image of the monolith, of course, was carefully removed and carried by Legras. Examined at headquarters after a trip of intense strain and weariness, the prisoners all proved to be men of a very low, mixed-blooded, mentally aberrant type. Most were seamen, and a sprinkling of Inwards and mulattoes, largely West Indians or Brava Portuguese from the Cape Verde Islands, gave a coloring of voodooism to the heterogeneous cult. But before many questions were asked, it became manifest that something far deeper and older than inward fetishism was involved. Degraded and ignorant as they were, the creatures held with surprising consistency to the central idea of their loathsome faith. They worshipped, so they said, the great old ones, who lived ages before they were any men, and who came to the young world out of the sky. Those old ones were gone now, inside the earth and under the sea, but their dead bodies had told their secrets and dreams to the first men, who formed a cult which had never died. This was that cult, and the prisoners said it had always existed and always would exist, hidden in distant wastes and dark places all over the world until the time when the great priest Cthulhu from his dark house in the mighty city of Rayla under the waters should rise and bring the earth again beneath his sway. Someday he would call when the stars were ready, and the secret cult would always be waiting to liberate him. Meanwhile, no more must be told. There was a secret which even torture could not extract. Mankind was not absolutely alone among the conscious things of earth, for shapes out of the dark to visit the faithful few, but these were not the great old ones. No man had ever seen the old ones, the carven idol with great Cthulhu, but none might say whether or not the others were precisely like him. No one could read the old writing now, but things were told by word of mouth. The chanted ritual was not the secret. That was never spoken aloud, only whispered. The chant meant only this: in this house of Rayla dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. Only 2 of the prisoners were found sane enough to be hanged, and the rest were committed to various institutions. All denied a part of in the ritual murders and averred that the killing had been done by black-winged ones, which had come to them from their immemorial meeting place in the haunted wood. But of those mysterious allies, no coherent account could ever be gained. What the police did extract came mainly from an immensely aged mestizo named Castro, who claimed to have sailed to strange ports and talked with undying leaders of the cult in the mountains of China. Old Castro remembered bits of hideous legend that paled the speculations of Theophasis and made the world seem recent and transient indeed. There had been aeons when other things ruled on the earth, and they had great cities. Remains of them, he said the deathless Chinamen had told him, were still to be found as cyclopean stones on islands in the Pacific. They all died vast epochs of time before men came, but there were arts which could revive them when the stars had come round again to the right positions in the cycle of eternity. They had indeed come themselves from the stars and brought their images with them. Here's another picture. Ooh, sorry, I'm gonna need another drink. These great old ones, Castro continued, were not composed altogether of flesh and blood. They had shape, for did not this star-fashioned image prove it? But that shape was not made of matter. When the stars were right, they could plunge from world to world through the sky. But when the stars were wrong, they could not live. But although they no longer lived, they would never really die. They all lay in stone houses in their great city of Rayleigh, preserved by the spells of mighty Cthulhu for a glorious resurrection when the stars and the earth might once more be ready for them. But at the same time, some force from outside must serve to liberate their bodies. The spells that preserved them intact likewise prevented them from making an initial move, and they could only lie awake in the dark and think whilst uncounted millions of years rolled by. They knew all that was occurring in the universe, but their mode of speech was transmitted thought. Even now they talked in their tombs, when after infinities of chaos, the first men came. The great old ones spoke to the sensitive among them by molding their dreams, for only thus could their language reach the fleshy minds of mammals. Then, whispered Castro, those first men formed the cult around small idols which the great ones shewed them. Idols brought in dim areas from dark stars. That cult would never die till the stars came right again, and the secret priest would take great Cthulhu from his tomb to revive his subjects and resume his rule of Earth. The time would be easy to know, for then mankind would have become as the great old ones, free and wild and beyond good and evil, with laws and morals thrown aside, and all men shouting and killing and reveling in joy. Then the liberated old ones would teach them new ways to shout and kill and revel and enjoy themselves, and all the earth would flame with a holocaust of ecstasy and freedom. Meanwhile, the cult, by appropriate rites, must keep alive the memory of those ancient ways to shadow forth the prophecy of their return. Thank you for sharing the stream with your girlfriend. Thanks for being here, guys. What the fuck? This looks pretty sick, too. I'll show it in a second. In the elder time, chosen men have talked with the entombed old ones in dreams, but then something had happened. The great stone city, regularly with its monoliths and I don't know what that is, had sunk beneath the waves and the deep waters, full of one of the primal mystery through which not even thought could pass. Had cut off the spectral intercourse, but memory never died, and High Priest said that the city would rise again when the stars were right. Then came out of the earth the black spirits of earth, moldy and shadowy and full of dim rumors picked up in caverns beneath forgotten sea bottoms. But of them old Castro dared not speak much. He cut himself off hurriedly, and no amount of persuasion or subtlety could elicit more in this direction. The size of the old ones, too, he curiously inclined to mention. Of the cult, he said that he thought the center lay amid the pathless deserts of Arabia, where Iram, the city of pillars, dreams hidden and untouched. It was not allied to the European witch cult, and was virtually unknown beyond its members. No book had ever really hinted of it, though the deathless Chinaman said that there were double meanings in the Necronomicon of the mind, or of the mad Arab Abdul Alhazred, which the initiated might read as they chose, especially the much discussed couplet. Here are the pictures from this too. Come on. That looks sick as fuck. So does that. That looks cool. The person that did the illustrations for this, it says in by John Colehart. Thank you, John. This is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die. Legras, deeply impressed and not a little bewildered, had inquired in vain concerning the historic affiliations of the cult. Castro apparently had told the truth when he said that it was wholly secret. The authorities of Tulane University could shed no light upon either cult or image, and now the detective had come to the highest authorities in the country and met with no more than the Greenland tale of Professor Webb. The feverish interest aroused at the meeting by Legras's tale, corroborated as it was by the statuette, is echoed in the subsequent correspondence of those who attended. Although scant mention occurs in the formal publications of the society, caution is the first care of those accustomed to face occasional charlatanry and imposture. Legras for some time lent the image to Professor Webb, but at the latter's death, it was returned to him and remains in his possession, where I viewed it not long ago. It is truly a terrible thing and unmistakably akin to the dream sculpture of young Wilcox. That my uncle was excited by the tale of the sculptor, I did not wonder, for what thoughts must arise upon hearing, after a knowledge of what Legrasse had learned of the cult, of a sensitive young man who had dreamed not only the figure and exact hieroglyphics of the swamp-found image and the greenland devil tablet, but had come in his dream upon at least 3 of the precise words of the formula uttered alike by Esquimaux Diabolus and mongrel Louisianians. Professor Angel's instant start on an investigation of the utmost thoroughness was eminently natural. Though privately I suspected young Wilcox of having heard of the cult in some indirect way and having invented a series of dreams to heighten and continue the mystery at my uncle's expense. The dream narratives and cuttings collected by the professor were, of course, strong corroboration, but the rationalism of my mind and the extravagance of the whole subject led me to adopt what I thought the most sensible conclusions. So, after thoroughly studying the manuscript again and correlating the theosophical and anthropological notes with the cult narrative of Legrasse, I made a trip to Providence to see the sculptor and give him the rebuke I thought proper for so boldly imposing upon a learned and aged man. Wilcox still lived alone in the Fleur-de-Lis, I think that's what it is, Fleur-de-Lis, building in Thomas Street, a hideous Victorian imitation of 17th century Breton architecture which flaunts its stuccoed front amidst the lovely colonial houses on the ancient hill and under the very shadow of the finest Georgian steeple in America. I found him at work in his rooms, and at once conceded from the specimens scattered about that his genius is indeed profound and authentic. He will, I believe, sometime be heard from as one of the great decadents, for he has crystallized in clay, and will one day mirror in marble those nightmares and fantasies which Arthur Machen evokes in prose and Clark Ashton Smith makes visible in verse and in painting. Here's this guy suffering right here. You can't really, you can kind of see it. Dark, frail, and somewhat unkempt in aspect, he turned languidly at my knock and asked me my business without rising. When I told him who I was, he displayed some interest, from my uncle had excited his curiosity in probing his strange dreams, yet had never explained the reason for the study. I did not enlarge his knowledge in this regard, but sought with some subtlety to draw him out. In a short time I became convinced of his absolute sincerity, for he spoke of the dreams in a manner none could mistake. They and their subconscious residuum had influenced his art profoundly, and he shewed me a morbid statue. Those contours almost made me shake with the potency of its black suggestion. He could not recall having seen the original of this thing except in his own dream bas relief, but the outlines had formed themselves insensibly under his hands. It was no doubt the giant shape he had raved of in delirium. That he really knew nothing of the hidden cult, save from what my uncle's relentless catechism had let it fall. He soon made clear, and again I strove to think of some way in which he could possibly have received the weird impressions. He talked of his dreams in a strangely poetic fashion, making me see with terrible vividness the damp cyclopean city of slimy greenstone, whose geometry he oddly said was all wrong, and hear with frightened expectancy the ceaseless, half-mental calling from underground, Cthulhu Phaeton. These words had formed part of that dread ritual which told of dead Cthulhu's dream vigil in his stone vault at Rayleigh, and I felt deeply moved despite my rational beliefs. Wilcox, I was sure, had heard of the cult in some casual way, and had soon forgotten it amidst the mass of his equally weird reading and imagining. Later, by virtue of its sheer impressiveness, it had found subconscious expression in dreams. In this bas relief, and in the terrible statue I now beheld, so that his imposture upon my uncle had been a very innocent one. The youth was of a type at once slightly affected and slightly ill-mannered, which I could never like, but I was willing enough now to admit both his genius and his honesty. I took leave of him amicably, not amicably, what the fuck word am I saying? And wish him the success his talent promises. The matter of the cult still remained to fascinate me, and at times I had visions of personal fame from researches into its origin and connections. I visited New Orleans, talked with Legras and others of that old-time raiding party, saw the frightful image, and even questioned such of the mongrel prisoners as still survived. Old Castro, unfortunately, had been dead for some years. What I now heard so graphically at first hand, though, it was really no more than a detailed confirmation of what my uncle had written. Excited me afresh, for I felt sure that I was on the track of a very real, very secret, and very ancient religion whose discovery would make me an anthropologist of note. My attitude was still one of the absolute materialism, as I wish it still were, and I discounted with almost inexplicable perversity the coincidence of the dream notes and odd cuttings collected by Professor Engel. One thing I began to suspect, which I now fear I know, is that my uncle's death was far from normal. He fell on a narrow hill street, leading up from an ancient waterfront swarming with foreign mongrels after a careless push from an inward sailor. I did not forget the mixed blood and marine pursuits of the cult members in Louisiana, and would not be surprised to learn of secret methods and poisoned needles as ruthless and as anciently known as the cryptic rites and beliefs. Legras and his men, it is true, have been let alone, but in Norway, a certain seaman who saw things as dead. Might not the deeper inquiries of my uncle after encountering the sculpture's data have come to its sinister ears? I think Professor Angel died because he knew too much, or because he was likely to learn too much. Whether I shall go as he did remains to be seen, for I have learned much now. How many of you guys are still hanging in there? What are we at? Two people here? Hey, thanks for sticking around. If you're here, say, hey. Ayo. Okay. Thanks for the likes, guys. I'm doing my best, so. Let me drink some hydration. Make sure that you're staying hydrated as well. Reading a lot. It's taxing. If heaven ever wishes to grant me a boon, it will be a total effacing of the results of a mere chance which fixed my eye on a certain stray piece of shelf paper. It was nothing on which I would naturally have stumbled in the course of my daily round, for it was an odd number of an Australian journal, the Sydney Bulletin for April 18th, 1925. It had escaped even the cutting bureau, which had at the time of its issuance been avidly collecting material from my uncle's research. I had largely given over my inquiries into what Professor Angel called the Cthulhu cult, and was visiting a learned friend in Paterson, New Jersey, the curator of a local museum and mineralogist of note, examining one day the reserve specimens roughly set on the storage shelves in a rear room of the museum. My eye was caught by an odd picture in one of the old papers spread beneath the stones. It was the Sydney Bulletin I have mentioned for my friend has... How many more pages we got of this? This is a lot, this is a lot drier than I was expecting. But then it didn't. Then again, it does. I was like, oh, maybe I should go on to the next thing, but. Gonna read stories. Oh, it looks like I'm only reading one. Whoops. You know, let's come back to this, because I do want to read some other stories. This wasn't as exciting of a story as I was hoping it was gonna be. Also, it's kind of long. I was hoping that it would be like... I thought it was going to be like 10 to 20 pages, not... I mean, 40 is still short, but... Or there's no fucking way of reading Frankenstein. That's an all-day adventure. Alright, how long is the House of... The Fall of the House of Usher? Alright. I'm switching books. During the whole... Okay, so this is The Fall of the House of Usher, Edgar Allan Poe. During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of the year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing alone on horseback through a singularly dreary tract of country, and at length found myself, as the shades of the evening drew on, within view of the melancholy House of Usher. I know not how it was, but with the first glimpse of the building, a sense of insufferable gloom pervaded my spirit. I say insufferable, for the feeling was unrelieved by any of that half-pleasurable, because poetic sentiment with which the mind usually receives even the sternest natural images of the desolate or terrible. I looked upon the scene before me, upon the mere house and the simple landscape features of the domain, upon the bleak walls, upon the vacant eye-like windows, upon a few rank sedges, and upon a few white trunks of decayed trees, with an utter depression of soul, which I can compare to no earthly sensation more properly than to the after-dream of the reveler upon opium, the bitter lapse into everyday life, the hideous dropping off of the veil. There was an iciness, a sinking, a sickening of the heart, an unredeemed dreariness of thought, which no goading of the imagination could torture into aught of the sublime. What was it, I paused to think, what was it that so unnerved me in the contemplation of the House of Usher? It was a mystery, all insoluble, nor could I grapple with the shadowy fancies that crowded upon me as I pondered. I was forced to fall back upon the unsatisfactory conclusion that while beyond doubt there are combinations of very simple natural objects which have the power of thus affecting us, still the analysis of this power lies among considerations beyond our depth. It was possible, I reflected, that a mere different arrangement of the of the particulars of the scene, of the details of the picture, would be sufficient to modify or perhaps to annihilate its capacity for sorrowful impression. and, acting upon this idea, I reined my horse to my precipitous brink of a black and lurid tarn that lay in unruffled luster by the dwelling and gazed down, but with a shudder even more thrilling than before, upon the remodeled and inverted images of the gray sedge and the ghastly tree stems and the vacant eye-like windows. Nevertheless, in this mansion of gloom, I now propose to myself a sojourn of some weeks. Its proprietor, Roderick Usher, had been one of the boon companions in boyhood, but many years had elapsed since our last meeting. A letter, however, had lately reached me in a distant part of the country. A letter from him which, in its wildly impromptu nature, had admitted of no other than a personal reply. The MS gave evidence of the nervous agitation. The writer spoke of acute bodily illness, of a mental disorder which oppressed him, and of an earnest desire to see me, as his best and indeed his only personal friend, with a view of attempting by the cheerfulness of my society some alleviation of his malady. It was in the manner in which all this and much more was said. It was the apparent heart that went with his request, which allowed me no room for hesitation, and I accordingly obeyed forthwith what I still consider a very singular summons. Although as boys we had been ever intimate associates, yet I really knew little of my friend. His reserve had always excessive and habitual. I was aware, however, that his very ancient family had been noted, time out of mind, for a peculiar sensibility of temperament, displaying itself, though long ages and many works of exalted art, and manifested of late, and repeated deeds of beneficent yet unobtrusive charity, as well as in a passionate devotion to the intricacies, perhaps even more than to the orthodox and easily recognizable beauties of musical science. I had learned, too, the very remarkable fact that the stem of the Usher race, all time honored as it was, had put forth at no period in any enduring branch. In other words, that the entire family lay in the direct line of descent, and had always, with very trifling and very temporary variation, so lain. It was the perfect keeping of the character of the premises with the accredited character of the people, and while speculating upon the possible influence which the one in the long lapse of centuries might have exercised upon the other, it was this deficiency perhaps of collateral issue and the consequent undeviating transmission from sire to son of the patrimony with the name which had at length so identified the two as to merge the original title of the estate and the quaint equivocal appellation of the House of Usher, an appellation which seemed to include in the minds of the peasantry who used it both the family and the family mansion. I have said that the sole effect of my somewhat childish experiment, that of looking down within the tarn, had been to deepen the first singular impression. There can be no doubt that the consciousness of the rapid increase of my superstition, for why should I not so term it, served mainly to accelerate the increase itself. Such I have long known is the paradoxical law of all sentiments having terror as a basis. And it might have been for this reason only that when I again uplifted my eyes to the house itself from its image in the pool, there grew in my mention it to show the vivid force of the sensations which oppressed me. I had so worked upon my imagination as really to believe that about the whole mansion and domain and hung an atmosphere peculiar to themselves and their immediate vicinity. An atmosphere which had no affinity with the air of heaven, but which had reeked up from the decayed trees and the gray wall and the silent tarn, a pestilential and mystic vapor, dull, sluggish, faintly discernible, and leaden-hued. Shaking off from my spirit what must have been a dream, I scanned more narrowly the real aspect of the building. Its principal features seemed to be that of excessive antiquity. The discoloration of ages had been great. Minute fungi overspread the whole exterior, hanging in a fine tangled webwork from the eaves. Yet all this was a part of it from an extraordinary dilapidation. No portion of the masonry had fallen, and there appeared to be a wild inconsistency between its still perfect adaptation of parts and the crumbling condition of the individual stones. And there was much of that reminded me of the specious totality of old woodwork which has rotted for long years in some neglected vault, with no disturbance from the breath of the external air. Beyond this indication of extensive decay, however, the fabric gave little token of instability. Perhaps the eye of a scrutinizing observer might have discovered a barely perceptible fissure, which, extending from the roof of the building in front, made its way down the wall in a zigzag direction until it became lost in the sullen waters of the tarn. Noticing these things, I rode over a short causeway to the house. A servant in waiting took my horse, and I entered the Gothic archway of the hall. A valet of stealthy step thence conducted me in silence through many dark and intricate passages in my progress to the studio of his master. Much that I encountered on the way contributed, I know not how, to heighten the vague sentiments of which I have already spoken, while the objects around me, while the carvings of the ceilings, the somber tapestries of the walls, the ebon blackness of the floors, and the phantasmagoric memorial trophies, which rattled as I strode, were but to which, or to such as which, I had been accustomed from my infancy. While I hesitated not to acknowledge how familiar was all this, I still wondered to find how unfamiliar were the fancies which ordinary images were stirring up. One of the staircases I met the physician of the family. His countenance, I thought, wore a mingled expression of low cunning and perplexity. He accosted me with expression of low cunning and perplexity. He accosted me with trepidation and passed on. The valet now threw open a door and ushered me into the presence of his master. The room in which I found myself was very large and lofty. The windows were long, narrow, and pointed, and at so vast a distance from the black oaken floor as to be altogether inaccessible from within. I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick. I'll be right back. All right. Feeble gleams of encrimsoned light made their way through the trellised panes and served to render sufficiently distinct the more prominent objects around. The eye, however, struggled in vain to reach the remoter angles of the chamber or the recesses of the vaulted and fretted ceiling. Dark draperies hung upon the walls. The general furniture was profuse, comfortless, antique, and tattered. Many books and musical instruments lay scattered about, but failed to give any vitality to the scene. I felt that I breathed an atmosphere of sorrow, an air of stern, deep, and irredeemable gloom hung over and pervaded all. Upon my entrance, Usher arose from a sofa on which he had been lying at full length, and greeted me with a vivacious warmth which had much in it. I at first thought of an overdone cordiality, of the constrained effort of the annoy man of the world. I don't know what that is. A glance, however, at his countenance convinced me of his perfect sincerity. We sat down, and for some moments, while he spoke not, I gazed upon him with a feeling half of pity, half of awe. Surely man had never before so terribly altered in so brief a period as had Roderick Usher. It was with difficulty that I could bring myself to admit the identity of the Wayne before me with the companion of my early boyhood. Yet the character of his face had been at all times remarkable. A cadaveriness of complexion, an eye large, liquid, and luminous beyond comparison, lips somewhat thin and very pallid, both of a surpassingly beautiful curve, a nose of a delicate Hebrew model, but with a breadth of nostril unusual in similar formations, a finely molded chin, speaking in its want of prominence of a want of moral energy, hair of a more than web-like softness and tenuity. These features, with an inordinate expansion above the regions of the temple, made up altogether a countenance not easily to be forgotten. And now, in the mere exaggeration of the prevailing character of these features and of the expression they were wont to convey, lay so much of change that I doubted to whom I spoke. The now ghastly pallor of the skin and the now miraculous luster of the eye, above all things, startled and even awed me. The silken hair, too, had been suffered to grow all unheeded, and as in its wild gossamer texture, it floated rather than fell about the face. I could not, even with effort, connect its arabesque expression with any idea of simple humanity. In the manner of my friend, I was at once struck with an incoherence and inconsistency, and I soon found this to arise from a series of feeble and futile struggles to overcome an habitual trepidancy and an excessive nervous agitation. For something of this nature I had indeed been prepared, no less by his letter than by reminiscences of certain boyish traits and by conclusions deduced from his peculiar physical conformation and temperament. His action was alternately vivacious and sullen. His voice varied rapidly from a tremulous indecision when the animal spirits seemed utterly in abeyance to that species of energetic concision, that abrupt, weighty, unhurried, and hollow-sounding enunciation, that leaden, self-balanced, and perfectly modulated guttural utterance which may be observed in the lost drunkard or the irreclaimable eater of opium during the periods of his most intense excitement. It was thus that he spoke of the object of my visit, of his earnest desire to see me, and of the solace he expected me to afford him. He entered at some length into what he conceived to be the nature of his malady. It was, he said, a constitutional and a family evil, and one for which he despaired to find a remedy. A mere nervous affection, he immediately added, which would undoubtedly soon pass off. It displayed itself in a host of unnatural sensations. Some of these, as he detailed them, interested and bewildered me, although perhaps the terms and the general manner of the narration had their weight. He suffered much from a morbid acuteness of the senses. The most insipid food was alone endurable. He could wear only garments of certain texture. The odors of all flowers were oppressive. His eyes were tortured by even a faint light, and there were but peculiar sounds, and these from stringed instruments which did not inspire him with horror. To an animalist species of terror, I found him a bounden slave. "I shall perish," said he. "I must perish in this deplorable folly. Thus, and not otherwise shall I be lost. I dread the events of the future, not in themselves, but in their results. I shudder at the thought of any, even the most trivial incident." Which may operate upon his intolerable agitation of soul. Sorry I'm so late, I was playing COD with my cousin. That's okay. I don't know who's here. I want to say... somebody's here. I know Dude Man's now here. Who else is here? I wish it told me. Let me know if you're still chilling here. Did I hit the end of this playlist? Oh, I did. I'm in Silent Hill, but it's 4 a.m. Ooh. I remember that town. Do I read it? I wish I was better at reading out loud to you guys. I was pretty excited to do this too, but I think I just picked a bad day to do this, or the wrong stories. I have indeed no abhorrence of danger except in its absolute effect and terror. In this unnerved, in this pitiable condition, I feel that the period will sooner or later arrive when I must abandon life and reason together in some struggle with the grim phantasm fear. I learned, moreover, at intervals and through broken, equivocal hints, another singular feature of his mental condition. He was enchained by certain superstitious impressions in regard to the dwelling which he tenanted, and whence for many years he had never ventured forth in regard to an influence whose supposititious force was conveyed in terms too shadowy here to be restated. An influence which some peculiarities in the mere form and substance of his family mansion had, by dint of long sufferance, he said, obtained over his spirit, an effect which the physique of the grey walls and turrets, and of the dim tarn into which they all looked down, had at length brought upon the morale of his existence. He admitted, however, although with hesitation, that much of the peculiar gloom which thus afflicted him could be traced to a more natural and far more palpable origin, to the severe and long-continued illness, indeed to the evidently approaching dissolution of a tenderly beloved sister, his sole companion for long years, his last and only relative on earth. Her decease, he said, with a bitterness which I can never forget, would leave him the hopeless and the frail, the last of the ancient race of the Ushers. While he spoke, the Lady Madeline, for so was she called, passed slowly through a remote portion of the apartment, and without noticing my presence, disappeared. I regarded her with an utter astonishment, not unmingled with dread, and yet I found it impossible to account for such feelings. A sensation of stupor oppressed me as my eyes followed her retreating steps. When the door at length closed upon her, my glance sought instinctively and eagerly the countenance of the brother, But he had buried his face in his hands, and I could only perceive that a far more than ordinary wanness had overspread the emaciated fingers, through which trickled many passionate tears. Make a... Okay, I can do that. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe I should be reading bedtime stories to you guys and not Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, to some, this is a bedtime story. Probably. Weird little emo kid. The disease of the Lady Madeline had long baffled the skill of her physicians. A settled apathy, a gradual wasting away of the person, and frequent, although transient, affections of a partially cataleptical character were the unusual diagnosis. Hitherto, she had steadily borne up against the pressure of her malady, and had not betaken herself finally to bed. But on the closing in of the evening of my arrival at the house, she succumbed, as her brother told me at night, with inexpressible agitation to the prostrating power of the destroyer. And I learned that the glimpse I had obtained of her person would thus probably be the last I should obtain, that the lady, at least while living, would be seen by me no more. Edgar Allan Poe. My mustache keeps tickling me. It should be tickling fair maidens. Nah, I'm just kidding. For several days ensuing, her name was unmentioned by either Usher or myself, and during this period I was busied in earnest endeavors to alleviate the melancholy of my friend. We painted and read together, or I listened as if in a dream to the wild improvisations of his speaking guitar. And thus, as a closer and still closer intimacy admitted me more unreservedly into the recesses of his spirit, the more bitterly did I perceive the futility of all attempt at cheering a mind from which darkness, as if an inherent positive quality, poured forth upon all objects of the moral and physical universe in one unceasing radiation and of gloom. I shall ever bear about me a memory of the many solemn hours I thus spent alone with the master of the house of Usher. Yet I should fail in any attempt to convey an idea of the exact character of the studies, or of the occupations in which he involved me, or led me the way. An excited and highly distempered ideality threw a sulphurous luster over all. His long improvised dirges will ring forever in my ears. Among other things, I hold painfully in my mind a certain singular perversion and amplification of the wild air of the last waltz of Von Weber, from the paintings over which his elaborate fancy brooded, and which grew, touch by touch, into vaguenesses at which I shuddered the more thrillingly, because I shuddered knowing not why. From these paintings, vivid as their images now are before me, I would in vain endeavor to adduce more than a small portion which should lie within the compass of merely written words. By the utter simplicity, by the nakedness of his designs, he arrested an overawed attention. Hey, C24. We'll get here till November. What super sour candy did you order? I was thinking of ordering one too. Actually, I've been trying to cut down on sweets and candy and stuff. I've been, I don't want to say I've been trying to eat better, but I'm trying not to eat as many sweets. I eat cereal still, but like the cereal that I'm eating is like high in iron because my doctor was like, you need more iron. Like, I take iron supplements and I still need more iron because I keep donating plasma, so. Okay, I'm gonna continue now. If ever mortal painted an idea, that mortal was Roderick Usher. For me, at least, in the circumstances then surrounding me, there arose out of the pure abstractions which the hypochondriac contrived to throw upon his canvases an intensity of intolerable awe, no shadow which I felt I ever yet in the contemplation of the certainly glowing yet too concrete reveries of Fuseli. One of the phantasmagoric conceptions of my friend, partaking not so rigidly of the spirit of abstraction, may be shadowed forth, although feebly in words. A small picture presented the interior of an immensely long and rectangular vault or tunnel, with low walls, smooth, white, and without interruption or device. Certain accessory points of the design served well to convey the idea that this excavation lay at an exceeding depth below the surface of the earth. No outlet was observed in any portion of its vast extent, and no torch or other artificial source of light was discernible, yet a flood of intense rays rolled throughout and bathed the whole in a ghastly and inappropriate splendor. I have just spoken of that morbid condition of the auditory nerve which rendered all music intolerable to the sufferer, with the exception of certain effects of stringed instruments. It was perhaps the narrow limits to which he thus confined himself upon the guitar, which gave birth, in great measure, to the fantastic character of his performances. But the fervid facility of his impromptus could not be so accounted for. They must have been and were in the notes, and well as in the words of his wild fantasias, for he not unfrequently accompanied himself with rhymed verbal improvisations, the result of that intense mental collectedness and concentration to which I have previously alluded, as observable only in particular moments of the highest artificial excitement. The words of these rhapsodies I have easily remembered. I was perhaps the more forcibly impressed with it, as he gave it, because in the under or mystic current of its meaning, I fancied that I perceived, and for the first time, a full consciousness on the part of Usher of the tottering of his lofty reason upon her throne. The verses, which were entitled The Haunted Palace, ran very nearly, if not accurately, thus. Sour Boys, level 5, level 4, 2 level... What the fuck is Sour Boys? Is there football going on? Yeah, that's true. There's football always. Sports are always going on. I'm gonna look up what Sour Boys are. These look like... Are these... I thought these were edibles for a second. They can't be that sour, right? How sour are they? Very sour. Joy only to the most extreme lovers of sour candy. Should I just get a bunch of these and eat them on stream? The Sour Boys Starter Pack. $69. Hey. You don't even get the most sour ones. You only get level 2s and 3s. I want to get fucking destroyed by these things. Actually, I don't. That sounds horrible. The only one that's a level 5 is Little Guy's Green Apple Sour Boys. Let me see what the 15 candies, 30 grams. For $6 though, that's a lot. Some people are saying the level 5 should be more sour. No. I'm reading The Fall of the House of Usher right now, but I could also read like The Raven, or honestly, if there's one that you want, I can read it, but I want it to try to finish this. I only got like 9 pages of it left. Try to decide yourself as supreme leader or something. I guess. Welcome to the streams, Giga Gamer. In the greenest of our valleys, by good angels tenant it, once a fair and stately palace, radiant palace, reared its head, in the monarch's thoughts dominion, it stood there. Never seraph spread opinion over fabric half so fair. Banners yellow, glorious, golden, on its roof did float and flow. All this was in the olden time long ago, and every gentle air that dallied in that sweet day. Along with the ramparts plumbed and pallid, a winged odor went away. Wanderers in that happy valley through 2 luminous windows saw spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law, round about a throne where sitting, in state his glory well befitting, the ruler of the realm was seen, and all with pearl and ruby glowing was the fair palace door, through which came flowing, flowing, and flowing, and sparkling evermore a troop of echoes whose sweet duty was but to sing in voices of surpassing beauty the wit and wisdom of their king. But evil things in robes of sorrow assailed the monarch's high estate. Ah, let us mourn, for never morrow shall dawn upon him desolate, and round about his roam, or round about his home, the glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dimmed remembered story of the old time entombed. And travelers now within that valley, through the red litten windows, see vast forms that move fantastically to a discordant melody, while, like a rapid ghastly river, through the pale door, a hideous throng rush out forever, and laugh, but smile no more. Wicket smells like witches, so it probably just smells like incense. Hey, we are Venom. Welcome back. Oh, yeah, in the background. Hello, future wife. I'm glad that you are doing well. Who's messaging me on Discord? Oh, it's Dude Man. Dude, I wish I could eat these with you. I'd only want one of each, though. I wouldn't want to go crazy on it. Alright. I well remember the suggestions arising from this ballad led us into a train of thought wherein there became manifest an opinion of Usher's, which I mention not so much on account of its novelty, for other men have thought thus, as on account of the pertinacity with which he maintained it. This opinion in its general form was that of the sentience of all vegetable things, but in his disordered fancy the idea had assumed a more daring character and trespassed under certain conditions upon the kingdom of an organization. I lack words to express the full extent of the earnest abandon of his persuasion. The belief, however, was connected, as I have previously hinted, with the grey stones of the home of his forefathers. The conditions of the sentience had been here, he imagined, fulfilled in the method of collaxation of these stones, in the order of their arrangement, as well as that in the many fungi which overspread them, and the decayed trees which stood around, above all, in the long undisturbed endurance of this arrangement, and in its reduplication in the still waters of the tarn. Its evidence, the evidence of the sentience, was to be seen, he said, and I here started as he spoke, in the gradual yet certain condensation of an atmosphere of their own, about the waters and the walls. The result was discoverable, he added, in that silent, yet impromptu and terrible influence which for centuries had molded the destinies of his family, and which made him what I now saw him, what he was. Such opinions need no comment, and I will make none. Our books, the books for years, had formed no small portion of the mental existence of the invalid, were, as might he supposed, in strict keeping with this character of phantasm. We pored together over such works as the Ververde Chartreuse of Grisset and the Belfort. Man, come on. Give me a word I know. The Heaven and Hell of Swedenborg. The Subterranean Voyage of Nicholas Klim by Holberg, and the Chiromancy of Robert Flood, of Jean Dinkagini, and of Dale Chambra, the Journey into the Blue Distance of Tyack, and the City of the Sun of Campanella. One favorite volume was a small octavo edition of the Dictorium Inquisitorium by the Dominican Emeric de Giorgione, and there were passages in Pomponius Mela about the old African satyrs and pageants over which Usher would sit dreaming for hours. His chief delight, however, was found in the perusal of an exceedingly rare and curious book in Quarto Gothic, the Manual of a Forgotten Church, the Vigili Mortuorum Secundum Chorum Ecclesiae Mongona. What the fuck is that? What kind of Twix are you eating? They still make different kind of Twix, right? Isn't there like a peanut butter one? Peanut butter chocolate anything gets me going. Not like that. That was the wrong way of describing that. Eat them all in one go and barf, dude, man. I want to see it. Actually, I don't want to see you barf because then I'll barf. Defenestration? No. There's like different types of Twix, though. There's like a cookies and cream Twix, too. Watch what I put in Discord. Oh, I've seen this. This is old as dirt. That's a classic. Pulled straight from the archives itself. Oh, there's a spot now on my channel that shows the members. Thank you, channel members. That's cool. All my friends are here on this. That's nice. I wish it showed all of you guys. There might be only 644 subscribers, but you guys show up. It's just green. Ow. Zombie Twix. It's actually just rotten flesh. It tastes horrible. When I drop a spooky dookie. If you ever go to a gas station, because it seems the only place they get them. If you go to a gas station, look through the candies. If you see one called Tangy Zangies, pick that up and eat that. Your poop's never going to look the same ever again. Alright, yeah, no, we'll do it. Fuck it. Why not? November 3rd? November 3rd. Monday? Perfect. Yeah, November 3rd. We're gonna watch, we're gonna watch Dude Man eat some candy and throw up. Dude, honestly, any Skittles that isn't just like original Skittles, to me, taste terrible. The smoothie one's okay. And like the tropical one is disgusting. I get a headache every single time I eat that one. Or what's the purple bag? That one's terrible too. The berry flavored one, it's awful. What's the other? Sour Skittles is good, but it always destroys my mouth. I don't know what other ones there are. I didn't really care that much that they brought lime back for Skittles because I didn't like lime to begin with. And then they changed it to green apple, and I was like, it's fine. But yeah, I don't particularly like the green. Like, if you were to take all the greens out for Skittles, I wouldn't care. I don't know. It's just not very good. I could not help thinking of the wild ritual of this work, and of its probable influence upon the hypochondriac. When, one evening, having informed me abruptly that the Lady Madeline was no more, he stated his intention of preserving her corpse for a fortnight. Get your V-Bucks, or previously to its final interment. And one of the numerous vaults within the main walls of the building, the wordly reason, however, assigned for this singular proceeding was one which I did not feel at liberty to dispute. The brother had been led to his resolution, so he told me, by a consideration of the unusual character of the malady of the deceased, of certain obtrusive and eager inquiries on the part of her medical men, and of the remote and exposed situation of the burial ground of the family. I will not deny that when I call to mind the sinister countenance of the person whom I met upon the staircase on the day of my arrival at the house, I had no desire to oppose what I regarded as, at best, but a harmless and by no means an unnatural precaution. At the request of Usher, I personally aided him in the arrangements for the temporary entombment. The body having been in coffin, we two alone bore it to rest. The vault in which we placed it, and which had been so long unopened that our torches half smothered in its oppressive atmosphere, gave us little opportunity for investigation, was small, damp, and entirely without means of admission for light, lying at great depth immediately beneath that portion of the building in which was my own sleeping apartment. It had been used apparently in remote feudal times for the worst purposes of a donjon keep, and in later days as a place of deposit for powder or some other highly combustible substance, as a portion of its floor and the whole interior of a long archway through which we reached it were carefully sheathed with copper. The door of massive iron had been also similarly protected. Its immense weight caused an unusually sharp grating sound as it moved upon its hinges. Having deposited our mournful burden upon trestles within this region of horror, we partially turned aside the yet unscrewed lid of the coffin and looked upon the face of the tenant. A striking similitude between the brother and sister now first arrested my attention, and Usher, divining perhaps my thoughts, murmured out some few words from which I learned that the deceased and himself had been twins, and that sympathies of a scarcely intelligible nature had always existed between them. Our glances, however, rested not long upon the dead, for we could not regard or unawed the disease which had thus entombed the lady in the maturity of youth, had left as usual in all maladies of a strictly cataleptical character. Yeah. The mockery of a faint blush upon the... I just lost my train of thought there for a second. Upon the bosom and the face, and that suspiciously lingering smile upon the lip, which is so terrible in death. Let's see. A whole share-sized bag of... Oh my god. I would feel so disgusting doing that. The bane of my wallet is Gundam models, but you guys know that. I'm trying to get better about it. Watching by myself, so I usually wait a month after a show releases. What show is it violent? Doing drugs and drinking and stuff is not worth it. I don't recommend it. Let's see, but yeah, I can... to a party last Halloween ago. As a small child if I cover my face. That's amazing. I mean, if you have a big enough costume, honestly, you'd probably be fine at any age. It's more of just like a, do you really want to go walking around and bothering people? I don't know. At the same time, it's like, if you have a job, it's like, I'll just go buy some. I don't know. I guess it's just like, like, do you really want candy? Like, I feel like as an adult, you're just like, I don't really want candy as much. C20, how old are you? I don't know if you're going to be able to have a growth spurt at this point. How tall are you? You're like 4 feet tall. I think a lot of places do like trunk or treat now, right? Like, what's the fucking point? We don't want the kids walking around the neighborhood. We'll just let them walk in the parking lot. Great. It's so fun. I mean, there's definitely some scary moments walking around in neighborhoods and stuff. I didn't really have the best time doing trick-or-treating as a kid. God, with this somber music playing now, it sounds like I'm going to tell you the saddest fucking story you've ever heard in your life. As a child, I was shot. No. No. This is one my brother and I laugh about all the time now. But, like, at the time, it was a horrible, horrible time. It ruined... It like, ruined Halloween for me for so long. I dressed up as Vegeta, and then my brother dressed up as another Dragon Ball Z character, I think. I can't remember. I want to say he dressed up as Gohan or something. But, yeah, I went with my dad and, like, some people there, too, and walking around the neighborhood, it's going fine or whatever. And then as we were walking back to the house, so like hold on, I'll create a diagram for you guys. I'm trying to, this is what I do for books. I just grab some random thing and, like, that's my bookmark. Hit some paper towels, put it in the book. That's my bookmark for now. gonna try my best to make this work. You can kind of see it. I wish I could. I can't really like hang this up anywhere. Okay, so this is how we're gonna do it here. So I'm gonna kind of try to draw the neighborhood that I grew up in. So here, long ass street, not really important. House lived in here, fenced area, you know. And then we had this person's house, which was always weird. It was kind of like a rectangle. I don't know. But this was the bus stop growing up, right here. There was like, it's not there anymore, but there was this like little stack of rocks. Or like, and then like so it was like 3 stacks of bricks or something, and then this big fucking rock. I don't know why it was there, but the way we would always just like grab the rock, not like pick it up because it was heavy as fuck, but we would like move it on the thing, and we would act like, because it sounded like a horse galloping, so we just go like with it, and I don't know why. It was probably a Fey trap, yeah. Anyway, let me tell you one of the worst times of my life. This is the road. This road doesn't have lines, actually. Yeah, this one. Fucking backwood ass drive. It's like, why am I even putting lines? Anyway. So, you know, the usual trick-or-treating route. You're going from here, go here, you might go over here. And yeah, go down, and then there's like a whole world down there. But anyway, this neighbor here decided, for some reason, that they were gonna burn all these leaves. And they were like in this like gutter thing. So as we're walking, so there's a street that's over here. Does this count as a spooky story that I'm telling? It's not even spooky, it's just bad. Other people's houses and shit, so you know, blah, 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 we're gonna go trick-or-treating back here, wherever we can. Woo! My friend Claire lived down the street there. Not really like a good diagram. But anyway, I'm going on a tangent. So we're going down, walking through here. Okay, you can't actually see that. We'll get to the consistency of the leaves. But, you know, it's dewy out, you know, like night. We're with a group of people. And I'm walking along here, along the edge. My dad says to watch where I'm walking. And I was like 8, 9, maybe. He's going to be really pissed that I'm telling this. I fell in to this pit here. I fell in with candy in hand into this pit. And my dad screaming at me, telling me that I needed to watch where I was going. He told me over and over not to fall in the pit, but he told me to not fall in the pit as I'm about to fall into the fucking pit. So he's dragging my ass out. I'm crying because I ruined all my fucking candy. And get home, my mom's like, what's going on? Like, why is Justin crying right now? And it's because I ruined all my candy. Because, you know, it's like cardboard boxes and shit, candy, like, you know, like dots and stuff, which is what I wanted. And, yeah, he whooped my ass. Yeah, I got my ass beat for that. Which was insane. But, yeah, I got my ass beat for crying and shit and not listening to him. And, yeah, so my brother and I reference it all the time now. We look back at it as like a... How are we supposed to know in those times? I think my brother was forced to give me some of his candy. Because I got mine ruined. It sounds like it should have been a funny story, but it wasn't. It sucked. What a terrible time. But we like to make Midwest emo songs out of it now. I just don't want to be a parent, honestly. I was about to say something that might have been a little too real. I probably shouldn't say. How many people are here? If it's only a couple, I'll say it anyway. Alright, whatever. I don't know, I kind of feel like I ruined my dad's life. Is that too real to say? Not ruined it, but I think I don't think I really helped my dad. I don't know. I've kind of just felt like a burden to a lot of people. I think that's part of why I don't text people often. Sometimes I feel like I intentionally ruin things. We should probably talk about something funny before I get sad. Can I rant about something that pisses me off here in Milwaukee? Since it's only Dude Man and C24, I'm gonna tell you guys my little rant. I don't know what doing great looks like for myself anymore. Like, I don't know what's enough anymore. Like, I'll do what makes you happy, and it's like, I don't know. I mean, doing this is great, but like, I know that it's unsustainable. Anyway, let me tell you something that pisses me off here. I'm going to draw here a little intersection, or try my best. I probably should have made it wider. So you got road here. Well, actually, I should just draw the car. I just draw a super detailed card. Anyway, okay, so this here, say this is your car, and you got cars back here too. And you got cars over here. You need to turn left. And they need to turn right. Well, actually, no. You need to turn left, and they're going straight. So they're going straight. So the cars will head towards this way. The people behind you are not going to wait behind you. They're going to go around you and go. And it's so fucking annoying. I absolutely hate it. But the thing that I hate even more, and it makes my blood boil, the intensity of 1,000 suns. Okay, I'm just going to make it to where we're on one side of the road because I'm not good at drawing. Say you're here and you need to go straight. Wow, that makes sense. But all of a sudden, a challenger approaches. Guess what? Some asshole is going to come up to the side here. And you're thinking to yourself, maybe he just needs to turn right, which is fine. Because that's why you should be in that lane. The moment it turns green, asshole decides, I'm going to jet off and go in front of you. And then you have to go. This person, I hope they die. Is that extreme? Yes. But they are the worst human being possible. And like, oh, you shouldn't wish death upon somebody. If this guy is jetting off and not giving a shit about anyone else and thinks that everything's about him, how do you think he lives his day-to-day life? If he's doing this, imagine what he's doing this. His day-to-day life. He probably cuts in line. He probably hits his kids. If he has kids, he probably thinks they're a burden. He probably doesn't see them. I don't know. He's probably a shit human being. But it's always people in the souped up stupid cars. And it's like, I just know that you're some giant asswipe of a fucking person. Like, I try not to just immediately clock somebody. But it's like, dude, I know that you suck. And you kind of want to fight them. You kind of want to beat their ass. But then you realize that you're in a car. And yeah, your car's kind of beat up. But you legally can't run them off the road. So I just flip them off and honk at them because they're assholes. Category 2 asshole, though. So say you're on the freeway. You got 2, maybe even 3. You know, we'll do 3. So you got 3 lanes of traffic going this way. They're going that way. Uh-oh, Challenger appeared again. Here he is. Stupid fucking asshole. He creates his own lane. You know, the where the guardrail is and people shouldn't be driving through here. Dumb shit here, thanks. I've created a secret hack. Let me blast off past all these people because I'm so special. I wish nothing but the absolute worst for those people. And some reason, it just seems like they never get pulled over. Like, what the fuck? What are we... Who's messaging me? Portable 2. That's... I kind of need that. God, I wish. I think that every year, one person, me, gets selected to have a ultimate destruction derby like Twisted Metal, but without the guns. But we make it into this crazy destruction derby thing, and it's me, and somehow they found 7 assholes that have cut me off or done stupid shit while driving, and they get cars that don't work, and I get a car that's 3 times bigger than theirs, and I just go over them. They don't die. They don't get injured. They will be protected, but I get to hit them with a car. Legally and not dead-wise. Come on, focus on me. This eraser is awful. Like, I don't think it's even erasing at this point. I don't think it ever did erase. I feel like I kind of ruined the vibe. Yeah, like a cartoon demo derby. Yeah. Yeah, something like that. That'd be kind of nice. Oh, this is doing... Why did I super glue this? I promise it's glue. I think I was told to clean it with Windex. That's better. This music's supposed to play. Oh, that was weird. What should we do now? Oh, it's midnight. I guess it's done. Well, this stream didn't go according to plan. Damn. Well, I want to thank you guys for taking time out of your day to hang out. You can make a fairy. Why would I make a smoke? Actually, you know what? Maybe I should make a smoke bomb. Not inside. I will die. You know, with the works and some other stuff, you can make a bomb. Don't look that up. All right. Well, the reading stream. I'll have to pick better stuff next time. But thank you guys for coming to the stream. Yeah. Thank you guys. I think everybody here is a member. But if you guys want to every single person that came to the stream today is a member. Except for a gerbatologist. Look at all these stars. That's insane. But yeah, thank you to Sane. Thank you to... actually, I think it came out. Thank you to Dude Man, Circus Scrap, Sane, Gerbatologist, Random Guy, Wonder Red, Helen, Giga Gamer, Low Rank God, and something for coming to the stream. I'm sorry I didn't finish any of the stories that I read tonight. But, believe it or not... Thanks, dude, man. I appreciate that. It's exhausting. I look like I am... This is making me look way worse than I really am, honestly. Like... Oh my god, this is... I look like a zombie right now. Like... I promise I look okay. I think I just strained my eyes or something. I'm not sure. Pyrotechnic stream? You think I got pyrotechnic money? Yeah. Thank you guys for coming to the stream. I appreciate you guys for being here. You look like you work retail. I kind of do. It's a... I mean, I work from home, but... It's essentially retail from home. But yeah. Thanks for coming to the stream tonight. I was $20 can get you a couple firecrackers. I don't think you can buy firecrackers. Well, actually, you might be able to buy fireworks in Wisconsin. I don't know, because I never buy fireworks. Where am I going to light them? In my apartment? No. That's a good way to die. But yeah, if you guys want to donate, you can. If you want to subscribe, you should. And if you want to be a member, it's $1. $500 budget, holy fuck. The donations will go to the stream. The subscriber count will go to the stream. All of it goes to the stream. But yeah. That's it. That's all she wrote. If you'd like to check out the books I read, you can, because they're in public domain. It's Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft. I wanted to read more. I wish I would have picked shorter stories, though. Note to self, don't pick something that's 40 pages. Stick to maybe 10 pages. But yeah. Alright. I'll see you guys later. Have a nice night. Bye. See ya. We're going to play a game tomorrow, but I don't know what it's going to be. I'm going to pick the most... Actually, I think I do know what I'm going to pick. I'm going to pick the scariest, most terrifying, most ass-bleedingly... it's going to make your butthole produce diamonds. You're going to be so tense. You're going to be scared out of your mind. I'm telling you, I'm about to pull out the scariest game you've ever seen in your fucking life. You're gonna go, oh my god, is this man deranged? What is happening? How can I pull something so sick and twisted out of my mind? But what game is it gonna be? We'll have to find out tomorrow, because I'm pretty sure I'm streaming. To my knowledge, I'm streaming tomorrow. If not, this will all be for naught, and it'd be really funny to just have nothing. But yeah, what's it gonna be? What's the spooky dooky game gonna be? It's gonna be fucking terrifying. You're gonna be so scared. That's fair with the movie marathon. Shit, I kinda wanna do that too. Should I not stream tomorrow? I don't know. I don't know. You'll have to tell me what movies you end up watching. I need to watch some more movies. I might take a break. I think I'll stream tomorrow, and then from there, I'm gonna probably take like a few days off. Well, congrats on shitting yourself, C24. Alright. Have a nice night, everyone. Bye. See ya. Clean yourself. I do what I want. I just wish there was more time. I just wish there was more time. Alright. Bye, guys. Bye. See ya.